Mother is finally here, and she brings with her some of the best damage and supporting abilities in Wuthering Waves. Changli is a character that many have been anticipating, and with her brief trial and amazing cinematics in version 1.1's main story, there was a lot to look forward to. With the ability to deal an impressive amount of on-field damage, as well as her incredible damage boosting capabilities through her outro skill, Changli is a character that brings a fresh new perspective to team building and fusion damage across the roster. Today we'll be breaking down all of the intricate mechanics in Changli's baseline kit, how to play her, and what her best echoes and weapons are. We'll also be covering some of her ideal teammates and why they're so good. If you're enjoying this content, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Changli's entire kit revolves around managing her Forte circuit to gain access to an empowered heavy attack. Every single part of her kit, from her basic attacks to her Resonance Liberation, all contribute to building up this Forte bar, and the goal across Changli's rotations is to use this empowered heavy attack at 4 stacks, which deals Resonance skill damage as often as possible. Changli gains charges on her Forte circuit through a mechanic called True Sight. After using her intro skill, or the 4th chain in her basic attack on the ground or in the air, or her baseline resonance skill, Changli enters True Sight and empowers her next basic attack on the ground or in the air. Using this basic attack will deal additional resonance skill damage, end True Sight, and add a charge to her Forte circuit. When it comes to her basic attacks, Changli can shorten the time it takes to reach her basic attack 4 by following up on her heavy attack or plunging attack with a basic attack within a certain time frame. Timing this input can be key to chaining together True Sights to maximize her Forte circuit charges. Changli's baseline resonance skill, which is another way to enter True Sight and gain Forte circuit stacks, has 2 charges. Using this ability will cause her to dash to a target enemy and gain the True Sight buff. And with a cooldown of 12 seconds on each charge, you want to make sure you aren't casting this ability until True Sight has ended to maximize your Forte circuit stacks. Moving further into her kit, Changli's Resonance Liberation is both a massive nuke and a massive buff to her damage. Casting the ability will deal Resonance Liberation damage in a large AoE, immediately grant her 4 stacks on her Forte circuit, and applies a buff called Fiery Feather, which grants her a 25% attack bonus after casting her empowered heavy attack. What this all means is that Changli's Resonance Liberation is one of the first things you should use across her rotation, as it will heavily buff the rest of her rotation with that attack buff active. After casting her empowered heavy attack and consuming her Forte circuit, you'll want to rotate through her resonance skill and basic attacks to enter and consume True Sight as fast as possible to get a second or even a third empowered heavy attack off before the buff from her Resonance Liberation ends. Looking at her skill upgrades, Changli gains a stacking fusion damage buff as she gains stacks on her Forte bar, at 5% each stack for a maximum of 20%. Her next skill upgrade increases her fusion damage bonus by 20% and causes her attacks to ignore 15% defense when using her enhanced heavy attack or her Resonance Liberation. Moving on to her sequence nodes, Changli's first few nodes are big buffs to her personal damage. S1 is a big quality of life buff, increasing the damage from her resonance skill and enhanced heavy attack, while also granting her interruption resistance. Her S2 gives her a massive 25% critical rate buff when she has any stacks on her Forte circuit. Her S3 increases the damage of her Resonance Liberation by 80%. On the other hand, her S4 is a more supportive ability that increases her entire team's attack by 20% after using her intro skill. Her S5 is another big personal damage boost to her enhanced heavy attack, and her S6 grants her 40% additional defense ignore across her most damaging moves. For most players, I recommend stopping at S2 if you're really heavily investing in her, as the additional crit stats and interruption resistance will make her a lot smoother to play, especially with how combo focused her kit is. At the end of the day, Changli is a DPS that can deal a large amount of damage, but she shouldn't be on the field for too long once her buff, Fiery Feather, from her Resonance Liberation ends. you'll want to actually swap off of her and onto a second DPS to maximize the potential of your teams. This is because Changli is very different from most traditional main DPSs. She has an outro skill that heavily buffs the incoming Resonator's fusion and resonance liberation damage for 10 seconds, which is very similar to Yinlin's, but at a significantly lower duration. Other traditional DPS characters like Jian, Calcharo, and Havoc Rover have an outro skill that deals a large amount of damage instead. When it comes to secondary DPS characters, the best ones you can pair with Changli are Chisha and Encore, simply due to the fact that they are both fusion damage dealers who can fully benefit from Changli's buffs. Chisha can use the buff through her own resonance liberation, while Encore can use the buff on her Forte Circuit's delayed explosion. If you're interested in character builds for these characters, check out my Changli team building guide, linked in the description. Another character who can take advantage of her buffs is Havoc Rover. Their incredible burst on their resonance liberation and low field time requirements can mesh well with Changli's outro skill. For her supports, you can ideally run Verena for her team-wide buffing, as well as Baija, or even Tao Chi for her great boost to resonance skill damage, and in turn, Changli's personal damage. Moving on to her equipment, maximizing Changli's performance means that you'll want to slot her with the Molten Rift Sonata set. This set's very simple activation condition of simply casting a resonance skill meshes well with Changli's kit. However, this also means you may want to use one charge of her resonance skill before her resonance liberation to maximize the uptime of all of your buffs. You can alternatively run a set that maximizes her buffing capability, like Moonlit Clouds, but with a lower duration on Changli's outro skill buff compared to a sub DPS like Yinlin, there isn't as much synergy here. So I recommend using Molten Rift instead to focus on her personal DPS and that part of her contribution to her teams. When it comes to her Echo substats, Changli will look for stats very similar to Jian, with a good balance of critical stats and a healthy amount of energy regeneration, as her resonance liberation is essential to maximizing her DPS across her rotations. With her energy cost of her resonance liberation reduced to 125 from 150 in a recent patch, 20% should be the minimum you're looking for to smooth out her rotations. When it comes to weapons, Changli has some fantastic options. For the 4 stars, Commando of Conviction is a great attack stat stick that synergizes with Changli's rotations, but requires a critical rate forecast to balance her ratios. Lunar Cutter is another great option, but generally less reliable than Commando of Conviction. For her premium options, starting with the Battle Pass weapon, Lumingloss isn't recommended at all. Changli does very little damage through her basic and heavy attacks, and the weapon has no critical stats, unlike other BP weapons. On the other hand, Changli's 5 stars are both absolutely fantastic options. Her signature is without a doubt her best in slot weapon, giving her a tremendous amount of critical damage while also giving her a stacking buff that increases her resonance skill damage. This weapon was also buffed alongside her resonance liberation to increase the duration of that resonance skill damage boost. The standard 5-star sword, Emerald of Genesis, is easily her second best weapon, providing a very useful energy regeneration stat alongside a great critical rate main stat, and a stacking attack buff that works amazingly with Changli's 2 resonance skill charges. If you have the standard 5-star weapon, either from the free level 45 box or through pulls on the weapon banner, I'm not sure I can fully recommend pulling for Changli's signature unless you have a lot of extra pulls after Changli, but if you're looking to maximize her power no matter the cost, you know what to do. With that, we've covered the essentials of Changli's kit and how you can build her across her teams. Hopefully this overview was helpful in highlighting some of the nuances within her playstyle and kit. She is without a doubt a complex character when it comes to her combos and inputs, and I'm excited to see how her playstyle develops into the future. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Peace out.